My name is Lauren. I'm 32 years old, and for a long time, the little house in a Chicago suburb was everything I poured my soul into. 8 years. 8 years of working weekends. 8 years of skipping vacations, saying no to dates, walking past beautiful dresses in store windows, just to stash away every dollar into my freedom fund. They called me the strong older sister, the responsible child. They were proud of how independent I was, but no one ever asked, what did that independence cost me? I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad, Frank, was an accountant. My mom, Carol, taught elementary school. We weren't rich, but we were fine, as long as you followed the rules. For me, everything had to be earned. New shoes, mow the lawn for 2 weeks, movie night with friends, get an A on your next exam. But for my younger brother, Zach, the rules were always flexible. I remember the first time I really saw the difference. I had saved up 3 months of allowance to buy a watercolor set. Zach, he just cried in the middle of the store and walked out with a brand new toy. My parents said, boys are more sensitive. Try to understand. Understand? I spent my whole childhood understanding his laziness, his selfishness, and later, his failure. I started working at 17, bussing tables, washing dishes, passing out flyers. The summer before college, I worked 2 jobs just to afford textbooks. Zach, he played video games, went to pool parties. Mom and Dad filled out all his college paperwork for him. We went to the same university. He lasted 3 semesters before getting kicked out for being, as Mom put it, too creative for a traditional system. Her words, not mine. I graduated and went into real estate. No one handed me opportunities. I had to fight for every client, every showing, every phone call. Zach, he bounced around. Bartender, phone sales, tried insurance, but never got the license. Every failure came with a new excuse. And my parents, they paid his rent twice, bought him a new car, cleared his credit card debt twice. Every time I asked why, the answer was always the same. He needs help. You're doing fine, aren't you? When a child is raised with constant safety nets, they don't learn how to live. But when a child is taught to be independent too early, they learn how to endure and stay silent. I bought my house at 29, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, big windows that looked out onto the garden. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, paid for with sweat, late nights, and quiet tears. I cried in my car for 10 minutes after signing the papers, not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in my life, I could look at myself and say, you did this. Zach showed up late, complained about his girlfriend, then asked to throw a party at my house because his apartment was too small. I said no, politely but firmly. A few days later, I got a text. You've changed. Owning a house made you stuck up. Maybe I had changed. I was no longer the agreeable daughter who made space so others could step forward. And then, on a Sunday night that was supposed to be like any other, my family announced that Zach would be moving in with me. No request, no discussion. It was already decided, as if my house was communal property, as if my dream home wasn't mine, but something to be shared, divided, repurposed. I didn't argue. I just pulled out an envelope. Inside, the paperwork showing I had sold the house. I didn't sell it out of spite. I sold it because I was done being used. I once believed the house symbolized success, but in truth, it had become a golden shackle, tying me to old roles and expectations. Selling it was the only way I could be free. Now I live in a small apartment in the city. No backyard, no balcony, but also no pressure, no obligations I didn't choose. Zach had to figure things out on his own. And my parents, for the first time in my life, they finally said the words I'd waited so long to hear. We weren't fair to you. That's what they finally said to me. If you've ever been the one overlooked in your own family, if you've ever been called too independent, too tough, too self-sufficient for your own good, I want you to hear this. You weren't wrong. You're not heartless. You were just trying to survive in a family that never learned how to love equally. I didn't lose a house. I found myself. If you've ever had to make a hard choice just to protect your own peace, I hope you'll share your story in the comments and like this video, not for me, but for you. Because you deserve a life where you don't need permission just to be yourself. And stay until the end, because this story is only just beginning. I entered real estate with exactly two things: a cheap handbag and a pride I kept hidden under my skin. I had no connections, no family in the industry. I started as an assistant, which meant coffee runs, printing contracts, and opening doors in houses I couldn't even imagine affording. But I watched. I listened. I studied how people sold dreams, read buyers with just a glance, made deals look like fate. I worked late, said yes to weekends, took every showing I could, and every paycheck, I moved 40% into a savings account I labeled Escape. Escape from what? From a home where I was only remembered when someone needed help. Never when someone needed to understand me. While I was building a future from sunrise to midnight, my brother Zach was finding himself through a resume that could stretch across a roll of toilet paper. He worked at a bar, got fired for giving his friends free drinks, worked at a phone shop, got let go after inventory kept going missing, tried insurance, but quit because learning the law was too exhausting. Every failure came with a brand new reason: toxic boss, drama coworkers, unfair systems. But never once did I hear him say, maybe it was me. My parents, of course, showed up right on cue. Zach can't pay rent? No problem. Frank and Carol will figure it out. His car broke down? Mom, a man needs a decent car for job interviews, and hands over the credit card. Credit card debt? We taught him his lesson. Now we need to help him get back on his feet. The first time, then the second, then nobody kept count anymore. Meanwhile, I once cried in a public restroom when my car battery died in the middle of winter because I didn't have enough money to replace it. I called my mom. Her reply, "You're strong, Lauren. I know you'll figure it out." That was when I stopped telling my parents when things got hard. Not because I had it all handled, but because I knew they weren't really listening. They were used to me handling it. They were used to Zach needing to be rescued. And somehow, they were fine with that imbalance. When I finally qualified to become a licensed agent, I didn't celebrate. I opened a new Excel file, logged my first commission, and moved 40% straight into the Escape account again. Because I wasn't out yet, but I was getting close. 2 years later, when the housing market in the Chicago suburbs started heating up, I saw an opening. A 3-bedroom craftsman, front porch, arched windows, morning light that poured into the living room like a quiet blessing. It was pricey, right at the edge of my budget, But I knew I couldn't let it go. I placed the deposit, applied for the mortgage, jumped through every hoop of credit checks, income verifications, and judgmental glances from bank officers when they saw I was single. And finally, on a Friday afternoon, I held the keys to that house. I don't remember how long I cried in the car. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 50. I just remember feeling light, like for the first time in my life, something belonged to me. Not handed to me, not allowed, but earned, fought for, mine. I called my parents. Mom squealed and promised to buy me a new espresso machine to celebrate. Dad said, "You finally have a place to settle down." They came to the housewarming party, brought a card, smiles, and Zach. Zach showed up 3 hours late, empty-handed. No congratulations, just stories about how his girlfriend dumped him and how his apartment was leaking everywhere. He looked around my house and said, "Can I borrow this place for a party? My place is too small." I smiled, soft but firm. No. The following week, I started getting a series of texts. "You've changed since buying that house. So arrogant. It's like you think you're better than the rest of us just because you have a mortgage." But the one that shut me down for a full 10 minutes was this. "You always think you're so smart, but you just got lucky." Lucky. Lucky is what people say when they never saw the nights you skipped dinner, rewore the same outfits for 3 years, and tracked every penny in a color-coded spreadsheet. Lucky is the word they use to erase all the effort they didn't bother to notice and never cared enough to ask about. After I bought my first house, everyone around me assumed my life had reached its next chapter. Stability, freedom, success. But no one saw the nights I sat on the bare living room floor with a paint roller in one hand and a voice in my head whispering, "No one's going to save you if this falls apart." No one saw my hands cracked and bleeding from painting each door, laying every tile myself, hands that had never touched a power drill before that year. No one knew what it felt like to stand ankle-deep in water after a midnight storm because the roof leaked, calling the emergency plumber at 2 a.m. with only $76 left in my checking account. Those 2 years in that house weren't easy. Every season brought a new disaster: leaking pipes, warping floors. In winter, the heater went out. In summer, the AC tripped the breakers. Every small issue came with a big bill. But I didn't complain because every repair, every coat of paint was part of something bigger. A home I was building for myself. I chose paint colors like I was painting my own soul. After years of being muted, I planted flowers after work because nothing healed me faster than sinking my hands into the soil after a day of putting on a professional mask. My house, flawed as it was mine. No one had the right to tell me I had to share it, just because it made sense to them. And yet, while I was trying to patch a leaking roof with YouTube tutorials, Zach was still living like there was always a soft cushion waiting to catch him every time he crashed. 3 months after the housewarming party, he was unemployed for the third time in a single year. This time, it was because the environment wasn't creative enough. Before that, the boss was too controlling. Before that, the coworkers were toxic. Funny how it's never his fault. Meanwhile, his apartment got noise complaints, too many parties, loud music, guests in and out like a frat house. His landlord refused to renew his lease. So once again, Zach was about to be out of a home. That's when Mom started texting more than usual, laced with suggestion. Your house must feel so spacious. 3 bedrooms for one person must feel a little empty. Then came Zach's cryptic messages, short, casual. What internet provider do you use? Is your Wi-Fi fast? Does the east-facing room get too much sun in the mornings? I read them with mild confusion, thought maybe he was comparing rentals, until one text came blunt and straight. Would a king-size bed fit in your spare room? I just stared at the screen, not because of the question itself, but because of how casually it was asked. No lead-in, no explanation, no would it be okay if, just a quiet assumption that it was already happening. At the same time, my parents started calling more often, no longer just our Sunday check-ins. Suddenly, it was Tuesday, then Thursday, then Saturday. Each time, Mom's voice, just checking in. But each call carried pieces of something bigger. Hints, nudges, soft pressure disguised as casual talk. Zach's going through a rough time, poor thing. You've got all that space. Maybe it'd be nice to have some company. You and Zach were so close when you were little. I finally asked, what are you getting at? There was silence. Then, nothing yet, honey. Just some ideas your father and I are thinking about. I started to feel suffocated. The air inside my own home, the place that used to be my sanctuary from everything outside, now felt thick, heavy, like every breath took more effort than it should. Zach kept texting. He sent me pictures of furniture he was considering for his new room, with a caption, I'm thinking something modern for the room, cool with you. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That house, every brick, every floorboard, every paint smudge I had scrubbed clean with my own hands, was now being casually reimagined into a temporary crash pad for a 30-year-old man who'd never once dealt with the consequences of his life. And then, the floor beneath me started to warm, not from family pressure, but from the house itself. It started with a soft leak under the kitchen sink. I figured, old pipes, quick fix, but the leak grew. The floor got damp. The musty smell crept into the wood. I called a plumber. They came, pulled up the subfloor, looked underneath, and shook their head. The main line's busted. Full replacement needed. Estimate, a little over $7,000. I froze. My savings account barely had $3,000 left. The rest had gone to a new water heater just 2 months ago. Before that, I paid for a full electrical rewiring after a panel nearly caused a fire. The house I loved was turning into a sinkhole, swallowing every dollar I made. I stared at the budget spreadsheets I used to build with such care, every color-coded box, every note in the margins, and realized I was sinking deeper each month, not from overspending, but from trying to keep alive a dream that had already started to crack. I called Rachel, my financial advisor, the one who helped me build the plan to buy this home in the first place. She listened quietly. Then she sighed and said, Lauren, you're becoming house rich and life poor. Have you ever thought about selling? I went silent. That question hit like a punch to the chest. Sell? The house I once called freedom? The house I once believed was my final victory after years of being overlooked. I felt like a failure. Like selling it meant I had lost the role I'd worked so hard to play. The strong, independent daughter who didn't need anyone. But Rachel didn't say that. She just placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "No one can live forever inside a dream that's slowly suffocating them." It took me 3 nights. The first night, I cried. The second, I rewrote my entire budget. The third, I called Aaron, a colleague in the field, and said, "I need a listing agent." Selling that house wasn't a decision I made lightly. I felt like I was betraying the 22-year-old version of me, the one who stood in the rain handing out flyers just to afford college. Like I was betraying the 27-year-old who said no to parties, dresses, vacations, just to save for a down payment. I felt like I was walking away from the greatest accomplishment of my life, but the truth was, I didn't have a choice. That house was eating me alive. One bill, one repair, one midnight sigh at a time. I didn't tell anyone, not because I feared judgment, but because I needed to do one thing, just one, for myself, by me, for me, without explanation. The night before I signed the closing documents, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by boxes. I didn't turn on the overhead lights, just a small lamp by the wall casting soft, blurry shadows. I whispered to myself, "I'm not giving up. I'm letting go of what's no longer safe." I signed the paperwork the next afternoon. Everything went smoothly. The buyers, a young couple, had a 5-year-old daughter. She wrapped her arms around my leg when she found out I was leaving the wooden swing set in the backyard. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I knew that house was going to someone who needed it the way I once did. And then came Sunday. I arrived at my parents' house at 5 p.m. sharp, just like I had every Sunday for over a decade. The table was set with a white cloth, crystal glasses polished to a shine, a bottle of chilled champagne sitting on the counter, waiting for something. I took off my coat and hung it up. Mom walked out of the kitchen with a gentle smile, but something behind it didn't feel real. "You're here. Zach should be arriving any minute." I sat down, trying to stay calm. Every detail in the house suddenly felt suspicious. From the finest china to the special bottle of wine, it all felt staged, like I'd walked into a scene that had been rehearsed. I knew it. They had planned something. I just didn't know what role I was meant to play in it. Zach showed up late, as usual, but this time he was wearing a collared shirt, hair neatly styled, carrying a gift bag and a bottle of red wine. My mother welcomed him like he was the prodigal son returning from war. "Zach, you brought wine? Oh, how thoughtful. Just wanted to contribute to tonight's special dinner," he said, with a wink that made my skin crawl. Dinner began. No one addressed why tonight felt different until dessert, when Mom brought out the apple pie. And Zach stood up. He picked up the champagne bottle, started peeling off the foil wrap. "I think it's time to share some good news with everyone." I sat upright, fingers gripping the edge of my chair. My heartbeat slowed. Not from excitement, but from an anger quietly boiling beneath the surface. Zach poured 4 glasses, raised his, and smiled brightly. "Starting next week, I'll be moving in with Lauren, just temporarily, until I get back on my feet." No one asked me. No one even looked my way for confirmation. Only my mother reached across the table, gently squeezed my hand, and said, "Sweetheart, you've always had the biggest heart of anyone I know." My father added, "In tough times, family pulls together. What's more valuable than siblings supporting each other?" Zach looked at me with that smug little smirk, like he had just signed a lease. "I can help with utilities or something. It's not like you're using the whole house anyway." The room went still with anticipation. They were waiting for my nod, waiting for me to play the role again, the good daughter, the selfless sister, the one who never says no. But this time, I didn't nod. I reached into my purse and pulled out a yellow envelope, placed it on the table, calmly, quietly, but firmly. There's been a change. I sold the house. Silence. For a few seconds, no one reacted. They thought I was joking. Zach laughed, sat back down, popped his champagne. Good one, Lauren. You almost had me. I didn't laugh. I pulled out the signed documents, placed them page by page in front of them. Closing was on Thursday. The buyers are a young couple. They'll be moving in 30 days. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Lauren, you can't do this. Why didn't you discuss it with the family first? I looked her dead in the eye. You mean like how you all discussed Zach moving into my house without asking me? Zach grabbed the papers, flipping through them like he was looking for some legal loophole. You did this to spite me, didn't you? You sold the house just to keep me from moving in. I kept my voice even. Not everything is about you, Zach. You were just a small part of a much bigger decision. My father's tone hardened. You should reconsider. Back out. Tell them you changed your mind. I let out a quiet laugh, bitter, not amused. I could get sued for that, and even if I couldn't, I wouldn't want to. My mother's voice cracked. He's your brother, Lauren. He'll have nowhere else to go. But I didn't flinch, not this time. If he needs a place, you and Dad can take him in. My father hesitated. Zach's old room is Mom's sewing space now, and the living room's full of storage. I smiled, cold. Ah, so my house was the only one expected to help, huh? Zach shot up from his chair, knocking it over. You've always been selfish, pretending to be strong so you can get everything you want. I stood too, facing him head on. It's not strength. It's learning not to let myself be used anymore. No one said a word. The room cracked open under the weight of silence. I reached for my bag, pulled out the final copy of the sale agreement, and handed it to my father. I'll be moving out in 4 weeks. Your son needs to find another solution. This time, he'll have to find it himself. I walked out of the house, the one that had raised me. But that night, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the disobedient daughter. I felt like an adult, a woman who had finally drawn a line, a woman who chose herself after years of choosing everyone else. I thought that night would be the end. I thought silence would be enough. But I underestimated how hard it is for a family, one that's grown used to me always being the one to back down, to let go of that dynamic. 2 days after the good news dinner, Zach texted, "We need to talk. I'm coming over tonight." No question, no waiting for a response, no permission, as if even now that the house was no longer mine, it was still somewhere he could go whenever he pleased. I thought about saying no, then I changed my mind. Fine, but not for long. I wanted to face him one last time for closure. That night, when I got back to the nearly empty house, Zach was already waiting on the front steps, jacket half on, his face carrying that familiar mix of irritation and entitlement. He walked in, looked around at the moving boxes, and sighed. You really did it. You actually sold the house. I didn't answer. I walked past him, placed my bag on the table, took off my coat. What do you want to say, Zach? He dropped onto the couch like he still owned the place. You've put me in an impossible spot. I told my landlord I was leaving. I told my friends I was moving into your area. Now what the hell am I supposed to do? I looked at him, a 30-year-old man, fully capable, educated, with Wi-Fi and every resource available, still waiting for someone else to save him. That's your problem, Zach, not mine. He let out a bitter laugh. So I have no place to stay, no job, and no family now? I sat down across from him, my voice steady. You have a family, just not the kind that functions as an ATM or backup plan every time you crash and burn. He stood up, started pacing. Fine, so you won't let me stay. Can you at least loan me some money? Just enough for a deposit in the first month's rent. I'll pay you back when I get a job. I didn't respond right away. In my mind, I replayed every past loan, every promise that turned into an excuse. The time he borrowed money to fix his car, then used it for a music festival. The time he needed a little help to get certified, but quit halfway because it was too much pressure. I had seen enough, endured enough. No, just one word. But it took me 32 years to say it with that kind of clarity. Zach froze. He laughed, but his voice shook. You really think I don't deserve help at all, do you? I looked him straight in the eyes. I think you've been helped too much, so much that you believe the world owes you something. He didn't argue. He just stood there, jaw clenched. Then after a pause, you think you're better than me? You lived in this house for 2 years and suddenly you think you've made it? I nodded slightly, bitter. I don't think I'm better. I just take responsibility for my own life, which is more than I can say for some. Zach didn't speak again. He grabbed his coat, headed to the door, his voice gravelly. You'll regret this. The door closed behind him. Heavy, like a final punctuation mark on a role I had been forced to play for far too long, the enduring older sister. I sat there, no tears, no anger, just drained. I picked up my phone, typed a message. Mom, Dad, Zach, from now until I finish moving, I won't be answering calls or texts. I need space to focus on my own life. I still love you, but this time I'm putting myself first. I hit send, then placed the phone down, and exhaled. The next morning, I received 3 replies. From Dad, I understand. Take care of yourself first. From Mom, why are you doing this? I feel so hurt. From Zach, nothing. That silence was the clearest confirmation I'd ever had that I had finally stepped out of the old cycle, and I had no intention of going back. In the weeks that followed, I packed, alone. No one called. No one offered help. I didn't need it. I sat on the floor wrapping old photo frames, some from graduation, some from that housewarming party where Zach arrived 3 hours late. I took down each curtain, each hook, each small detail that once brought joy. And now I didn't feel sad. I felt light. One morning, I passed by the room that used to be my home office, where I stayed up late building plans, writing goals, dreaming about the future. I placed my hand on the wall, right where I'd once taped my 5-year plan, and I thought the plan changed, but I'm still on track. For the first time, it's a track of my own choosing. My new apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse. No backyard, no wooden porch for morning reading, no lilac tree I once nurtured with patience and love. Just a tidy space with polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and wide windows looking out over the gray-silver city skyline. And yet, I could finally breathe. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in fear that everything might collapse at any moment. I didn't bring much. Everything I owned fit into a dozen or so moving boxes. I'd chosen carefully, only kept what mattered, just like I was now doing with the relationships in my life. Keep what's healthy. Let go of what drains you. 3 weeks after the move, I got a message from my dad. Your mom and I cleared out the living room. Zach's staying with us for a while. We're going to try doing things differently. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Surprise? Confusion? Hope? All I knew was that, for the first time in years, my parents weren't handing responsibility back to me. Frank and Carol, my parents, had always been the kind of parents who went easy on the weaker child. They shielded Zach from consequences so thoroughly that he came to believe the world would do the same. But now, it seemed that the moment I stepped away from the role of last resort, they had no choice but to face reality, and this time, having Zach stay came with conditions. A week later, my mom called. Her voice was tired but firm. I've set rules, she said. The living room is temporary. Zach has to pay utilities, help with chores, and let us know if he's staying out. I can't keep sacrificing like before. I sat in my small kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, listening quietly. She continued, Zach was furious at first, but your dad backed me, and eventually he agreed. I never thought my family would change. I had let go of that hope long ago. But maybe it wasn't until I walked away that they were finally forced to stand on their own. A week later, Zach texted me, I've got a job interview. Dad's been helping me prep. Didn't think he'd be this good at it. I read that line more than once. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part felt a tightness in my chest. I didn't reply, but I smiled, not because I suddenly believed Zach would change forever, but because, for the first time, I wasn't the one leading him anymore. A few days later, my mom and I met at a small cafe near my new place. She arrived early, same posture, back straight, hands folded. But this time, her eyes looked different, not pleading for help, but offering something closer to acknowledgement. You were right, she said plainly. We coddled Zach for too long. We thought helping him meant loving him. Turns out, it just damaged him. I tightened my grip on my cup. I had dreamed of hearing those words so many times, but when they were finally said aloud, I just felt empty. No big emotional moment, no soundtrack, just a truth, late in arriving. But at least it arrived. Has Zach started working yet? I asked. She nodded, pride flickering across her face. He got a marketing assistant job at a small firm, takes the train every day. Complained at first, but this week, he's been up on time 3 days in a row. I didn't react much. I'd learned not to expect too much from Zach, but at least now he was living in the real world, not hiding behind the safety net I used to be forced to play. The first Sunday dinner I returned to, after months away, wasn't the same as before. The energy was quieter. My parents no longer looked at me like I owed them some form of sacrifice. Zach was different too, dressed neatly, speaking more carefully. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't boast. He simply said, There's a lot I still need to learn at work, but at least I've started. I nodded. No praise, no sarcasm, just acknowledgement. A beginning is sometimes best met with silence. Later that evening, as I helped my mom wash the dishes, she turned to me, something soft in her expression. I'm sorry, she said, for placing you in a role you never chose. You deserve your freedom. I turned away, pretending to scrub a plate more thoroughly, because I didn't want her to see my eyes turn red. I simply replied, I'm sorry too, for staying silent for so long. Healing in a family, I've come to realize, doesn't arrive in some grand, magical conversation. It happens in the quiet, repeated actions, in the way each person slowly learns to see each other more clearly and look inward more honestly. 3 months later, Zach moved out. A one-bedroom apartment, 10 minutes on foot from his office. Not glamorous, not a giant leap, but it was a step he took on his own. I went to his housewarming. Not many people, just a few co-workers. Mom brought pie. Dad opened an old bottle of wine. Zach gave me a quick tour. Then, as he walked me to the door, he said, Thanks for not letting me stay with you. I was angry back then, but now I get it. I smiled but said nothing. I just set down a small plant beside the bookshelf he had just assembled. A quiet congratulations without needing words. My family didn't suddenly become perfect after everything. We still clash. There are still unspoken distances. But for the first time, we're learning to exist around each other. Not with expectations, but with boundaries. 6 months after I left the house that once felt like the pinnacle of success, I held the keys to a new place. Not big, not flashy, no backyard to plant lilacs. Just a modest home with a soft gray roof, 2 small bedrooms, a clean kitchen, and a little front yard. Just enough space for a few pots of green. I didn't cry like I did when I bought my first house. I didn't feel triumphant like I had won something. I just let out a long breath and smiled because this time I wasn't buying into a dream. I was choosing a life. I used to believe a home had to be grand, roomy, with a guest bedroom, a dedicated workspace, a garden for every flower, a porch for rainy day reading. But all of that, if it came with financial strain, crushing loneliness, or constant invasion by other people's expectations, wasn't really a home. It was just a shell built for someone else's definition of enough. This new house didn't carry any of that weight. It was modest, and because of that, it was peaceful. I painted the living room walls an olive green, built a small bookshelf with my own hands, placed a few stems of dried lavender by the window. The space was smaller, the sunlight dimmer, but there was no corner being overtaken, no lingering sense that someone might just drop in to crash. No more guilt-drenched expectations masked as love. It was simply where I lived, and for the first time in my life, it felt like mine. During the move-in process, I got a surprise phone call from Zach. Mom told me you bought a new place. Need help with anything? I paused for a second, not out of shock, but because I didn't recognize his tone at first. Calm, steady, no passive-aggressive dance. I answered gently, No need, but thank you. He hesitated, then said, Well, if you ever need shelves mounted or something, I can come by. Not to stay over this time, I promise. I laughed, softly but not bitterly. For the first time, I believed him. My parents visited the following week. Mom brought apple pie, the kind she knew I liked. Dad stood back, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the place. Just right, he said, nodding. Nothing flashy, but neat, cozy, feels like you. I didn't correct him because for the first time, I didn't need to justify my choices. That evening, we sat around a wooden table I had bought from a second-hand shop. Zach showed up late, but this time he knocked. He brought wine and a small potted plant. "You said you liked rosemary, right?" he asked. I looked at the little green sprig and understood. Some apologies don't need to be spoken. They just need to be shown. We had dinner, no rehashing the past, no remember when you, no you always, just a meal of a family learning to coexist again without smothering each other. I learned that boundaries don't push people away. In fact, clear boundaries are what make real love feel safe. I used to fear I was a bad daughter for drawing lines, but in the end, it was stepping away from the role of the sacrificial older sister that forced all of us to confront our patterns. Zach still has a lot to learn. I don't fool myself into thinking a few good months will undo years of habits. But he's working regularly now, paying his own rent, even opened a savings account. And most importantly, he no longer looks at me like I'm his last resort. One night, he texted, "I didn't get it back then. Why you cut contact? Now I do. Must have been exhausting." I read it, then quietly deleted it without needing to respond. It wasn't anger that made me delete the message. It was the realization that I no longer needed to explain myself. No more convincing anyone I was right. I know I was right because I survived. And more than that, I've learned how to live well. This new home carries no echoes of sacrifice or past wounds. Every little corner reminds me I don't have to live big to be seen. I just have to live true, and that's enough. Each morning, I make my coffee, open the windows, and let the light in. I listen to music. I read, I work, I come home, I cook. I call people because I want to, not because I owe them something. I no longer fill empty rooms so someone else can temporarily stay. No longer wear strength as a mask for exhaustion. No longer have to be Lauren, the dependable older sister, the family's emotional safety net. I'm still Lauren. But this time, I'm the version that no longer erases her boundaries in the name of family. Once, a colleague asked me, "If you could go back, would you still buy that big house again?" I didn't even hesitate. Yes, because without it, I wouldn't have learned where my limits are, wouldn't have known what is enough, what is too much, what is love, and what is exploitation. A life worth living, I've learned, doesn't begin when you gain something. It begins the moment you're brave enough to let go. By walking away from a dream that no longer fit me, I reclaimed the most important thing I had ever lost, myself. I chose my life back, not with struggle, but with quiet conviction. And the miracle was this. When I stopped being everyone's safe haven, they finally had to learn how to stand on their own. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. I want to read what you've been holding in, because I believe your story deserves to be heard too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell so you won't miss the next real story from real people, finding their voice in silence. Thank you for staying until the end.